Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 100. 4 ways to improve intimacy when you don't really want to.
Okay, 4 ways to improve intimacy when you really don't want to. But before that, you said episode 100.
Yes.
This is very exciting.
Very exciting.
This is a big accomplishment.
It is.
So 2 years ago, you started this podcast.
That's right.
And you started it alone. And every once in a while, I was on. And then about a year ago, I joined you. So first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to join you in your podcast. I hope that I've been helpful. And I'm very grateful for everybody that has listened, because I know that if you've listened to this podcast, then you've been helped in some way or another, because the information that we're sharing is helpful. It's been helpful to us in our marriage and in our personal individual lives as well. And we really hope that you've shared it with others and it's helped them too. And thank you so much for listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also, we started putting this on YouTube a few months ago. And so thank you for watching YouTube. And if you watch it on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and hit the little thumbs up button. That would be great, because that helps it get out to more people. And so thank you for doing that. And again, please share it with whoever you can, because this isn't just for people who are like, I have a bad marriage and I have a terrible intimacy in my life. I think everybody wants to improve their intimacy with their spouse. And so even people who have great marriages, this is helpful. And this is our journey that we're sharing, and you can relate it to your own life. And I think that's a really helpful way to do it.
Yeah, that's true. It reminds me of a conversation I had probably about 2 weeks ago with the girl that does my hair. She knows what we talk about, and she's always asking questions. And I think it's probably well known that sometimes hairstylists are known as therapists, right? It's like we're getting our hair done and people just start talking. They let all the deets out.
I tell my stylist everything.
So anyways, it was super fun to have a conversation with her recently, where she was telling me that so many of her clients, when they are talking to her while getting their hair done, that they have pretty good marriages. Like the husband is pretty good, the wife's pretty good. There's no like these major things that are happening. And yet their number one struggle is intimacy. And they're struggling with knowing how to solve it. And so she's like, man, these are good people, but they're suffering with this part of their marriage.
Well, everyone suffers with this part of their marriage. This is part of the reason marriage is so awesome, because if you go through it the right way, if you grow through what you go through, you should be getting closer over time.
Yes.
And if you're not, that's why we're here to help.
That's right. And I think it's so important. I know we've said this before, but marriage is meant to have its ups and downs, and so is intimacy. And I think we can get really stuck when we think, hey, we've waited a long time for intimacy, right? We were taught abstinence and now it's here, so now it should go well. But that's not really the case. It actually also should have its ups and downs. And if we know that and expect that, then when those hard times come, we're like, yep, that's about right. This is about what we're supposed to be struggling with right now.
Well, there's like this apathy that we gain through marriage that I think culturally we just accept. Like after you've been married a few years, things aren't as exciting. The kids come and life just kind of makes you feel like you need to just survive.
Yes.
Okay, so there's that apathy side, and you just accept what you've been taught. Maybe you watched your parents just live a certain way and they just accepted it. Well, there's that. And there's also this feeling of drowning in doom and hopelessness also at times.
Yeah.
And maybe we feel like, my spouse doesn't love me anymore. They're not attracted to me anymore. Or will it ever be exciting like it used to be? How did we lose that magic? Well, I think all of us feel those things. And whatever it is, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. And so we're going to talk about 4 ways to improve our intimacy when we may not even want to, or when we may feel like there's no hope and there's no way out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're thinking, man, intimacy, that's such a big thing. Like, can I fix something that big? And it's so related to so many other things. And because we view it as this huge thing, we might become even more hopeless of even wanting to try because it seems too big. And when we're stuck in those kind of thinking patterns, we do become more apathetic. And that puts us in a place of inaction, right? It's like we don't know what to do, so we're not doing anything. So the result is that our intimacy is not improving.
Right.
And that's where a lot of my clients come to me is they're like, I would like for things to improve. I don't know how to do it, right? They're stuck there. So we're going to go through these 4 different ways to improve intimacy, and they're going to come in the form of questions. So we're going to ask you 4 different questions. Question number 1 is, what 3 things get you in the mood for intimacy that have nothing to do with your spouse? Now, this is going to be especially important for women because a lot of times they really connect their intimacy or think about that side of themselves in relationship to their spouse. They don't think about it almost like as an individual thing, that is a part of themselves separate from their husband. Now, yes, it does relate to him and how they're experiencing that and thinking about it. But a lot of times they never have taken the time to say, well, what's this part of me for me? And so when I have a client that comes to me and is really struggling and they say, man, I am just never in the mood. My husband, yes, he's in the mood all the time. And so they think something's wrong with them. They think they're broken. They think that they need to go see an endocrinologist to fix all their hormones. Okay, that is not the case, right? It's rarely hormones that are the problem.
It may be hormones, but most of the time we think it's something that it's really not. There's an underlying problem.
Yes, and that is how we're thinking about it. And so when they're like, I'm never in the mood, it's because they're relating all that to their spouse. So we want to say, let's ask this question. Can you really identify 3 things that get you in the mood that are not related to your spouse in any way, shape, or form? Now, what do we mean by that? An example of this for me is, yes, I like to make my to-do list every day, right? It's like, these are the things that just need to get done. That to-do list does nothing for me, except that I just know I got it done. That does not add to me being in the mood for intimacy, just getting those things done, the laundry or grocery shopping. But if I have a project that I'm working on, it could be related to work. It could be related to, hey, I want to help my daughter organize her closet. That's a project. If I can accomplish a project, oh my gosh, this does wonders for me wanting to be intimate with you. And what I love about this is that it's not related to sex.
Right.
And so this is sometimes where women get trapped, where they think, well, in order for me to be in the mood, it has to be something that's related to sex. And I'm like, no, let's take away those limitations.
Right.
What other parts of yourself and what other things are you involved in that say, hey, when I'm doing this, then I want to connect with you? Like, what draws you in that maybe is not even related to sex that puts you in that place?
Or even something that you're accomplishing that you want to share with me.
Yes.
And talk about and get excited about.
Yes.
It's more about connection, right? Because that comes way before the actual physical intimacy part.
Yes.
And this is something that I've discovered along this journey as a man. I think most men can go to the physical part much faster. And now I'm going to bring up stress, because stress is a great way, or intimacy is a great way to relieve stress, especially for men. And it's a blocker for women in general. But it's become a blocker for me because as I've learned that the intimacy trek requires that emotional attraction and the emotional intimacy part, which is what you're talking about, I know that if I want to get intimate with you, it's going to take some work for it to be really worthwhile. Because look, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Great. Every once in a while, that's wonderful. But in general, it's not a good way to live. And so for me, when I'm stressed out, I have something overhanging or a project that I haven't finished, something like that, it can add stress, and actually it can be a blocker for me too, because I don't want to go through all of the whole process to connect with you.
Yeah.
Because I'm stressed. So I can focus on that thing that doesn't have anything to do with it. For example, my daughter asked me to do something for her a few days ago, and I was putting it off because I was busy. Yesterday, I went and started doing it, and I felt 100 times better. And that stress went away because I started working on it.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not even accomplishing it, but it's reducing the stress of having things hanging over me that I just feel that weight. And when that weight starts to come off of me, it helps me a lot.
Yeah, that's so true. When I ask my clients, like, can you really identify other things that get you in the mood, or what are they? They have a blank stare, and their answer almost 100% of the time is, I don't know. I don't know what gets me in the mood.
Right.
And they really don't. So again, this question, I would love if whoever's listening to this to really use this question to kind of dig deep and say, do I know the answer to this question? Can I say and identify 3 things that get me in the mood that are not related to my spouse? It is a fabulous and genuinely curious question about yourself. And that is a good place to start wondering about intimacy, is from this own self-discovery.
Yeah, and it still doesn't have to be about a spouse, right?
Yeah.
Because when you want to connect, you feel better.
Yeah,
Right? That comes from feeling better on your own.
it does.
So you've already helped yourself. And then if you feel like being intimate with your spouse, well, that's just a bonus.
It is a bonus. Okay, question number 2. What is your current relationship to intimacy? Now, when I'm working with a client on this part of their relationship and the sexy side of themselves, it's very fascinating to see in what terms they talk about it in. And usually they're saying, well, I'm not a sexy person. I'm just not like that. As if certain people are just given sexiness and it's just this few number, and then everyone else is just not endowed with this magical gift of sexiness. And so they feel there's this very large disconnection. But usually that's because they are only thinking about intimacy mainly in terms of their past.
Right.
Sometimes they've had negative experiences. Maybe they've been molested. If they were taught abstinence growing up, like I was, you didn't really connect to that side of yourself growing up at all, right? Because it was more of like, hey, don't do that. So you didn't really develop that connection. So now that they're married and I say, what is your relationship to intimacy? They don't know how to answer that. Or they say, well, I was taught not to have it, and now that I'm having it, I'm not really enjoying it. So it's a different layer of a limitation. And what the whole purpose of asking this question is what are you doing now? Are you still connecting to intimacy only based in the past? Because if you are, we need to say, thank you, my past and my upbringing, for doing your job and serving your purpose. But now I'm going to move things forward, and I'm going to try to have a relationship with the intimate side of myself from now, but also from a perspective of my future. What do I want that side of myself to look like? How do I want to connect with intimacy? How do I want to relate to it? Because so far it's been pretty crappy. And so unless we kind of make that decision and think about it from maybe a future perspective, we're going to stay stuck in that crappy perspective.
Well, and it's not even future, it's now. right? Right now, what's my relationship?
Yeah.
And you don't have to stay in that place.
No.
You know, it always bugs me when, you know, people talk about their wedding dress and, oh, I couldn't fit in my wedding dress. And, you know, and for guys too, like we try to get in really good shape for a wedding and we want to look as good as we can for a wedding. And then life hits us, kids hit us, we gain weight, and we go through these cycles. Well, that has nothing to do with how you can connect with your spouse. You are the one that can take control of that and you can make changes, but it is not completely connected to how you look. It's how you feel, right? It is how you feel. And so there may be, you know, people who say, well, my husband's not attracted to me anymore. I guarantee you your husband will be attracted to you if you start thinking about this.
Yeah.
And just putting the effort in and trying is a huge turn on for us, right? We may know, and we may not say it, but we may know, yeah, you know, you've put on some weight or, you know, you're getting older. But I'll tell you, age is not a factor. I don't think age is a factor at all. Weight might be a factor for some people because there's health involved, right? And you might not feel as energetic.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is about how we feel about ourselves. And that is totally related to our thoughts.
Yes.
And how we think. And so what we're saying right now is decide right now to stop thinking that way. Stop it. And really assess where your relationship with intimacy is. And if you don't like it, start changing it.
Yes.
And so we're going to continue to talk about how to do that.
Yes. And when we kind of are able to say, you know what, I want to improve things, not only does it give us hope for the future, but even just that thought of saying, I want to improve things, improves things right then and there.
It does.
Even if you don't have like a laid out plan or all the answers, that thought is going to create a much better emotion within you. And when you feel better, you take better actions, even if they're not all like perfectly lined out.
Yeah.
So it's just great. It's super beneficial. Okay, number 3. What are you blaming your spouse for the most when it comes to intimacy?
I blame you for all kinds of things.
I remember talking to someone several years ago about blame in relationships. And I was like, hey, I want to help people eliminate blame. And she's like, I love blaming my husband for everything. And I was like, oh, yes. This is such a natural thing to do, is to just fall right into blame. And when it comes to intimacy, we may not think we're blaming because blame can come up in several forms, but these are a couple hints. If you want to start a sentence with the word you, like, well, you never help with the kids putting them to bed, right? That's a blaming sentence.
Yeah.
And so it's a good idea to maybe self-observe over the next week how many sentences you are saying that start with the word you.
And if you're saying sentences with the word you, how often is it you are always so beautiful?
Right. They're probably not
Right,
positive or complimenting.
That may happen, and that's a really positive way to use a you sentence. But as humans, when we use you sentences, we're usually saying you did this or you didn't do that.
Yes.
And you should have done that.
Yeah.
And that's what we really are talking about, because that is also one of the biggest intimacy killers is blame. It's
huge.
Now, people, you know, you might see in media, or maybe you've had this experience where people have like angry sex. You know, they're really mad, but they still have sex, and it's kind of like, just to get that anger out. And it's not even a connection at all. It really is. It's really kind of a violent act, you know, when we go there. And if that happens, that's not going to happen often.
No.
So blame is not a way to connect with your spouse.
No, and it's definitely not something that contributes to, you know, a healthy relationship in the long run, right? Of course, there's always going to be situations where things happen outside the box, right? Out of the norm. But when we're looking at, like, we're really struggling with intimacy, we're trying to make certain connections that actually improve intimacy long term, not these short fixes.
And not just the physical part.
Right.
Because, look, let's just face it. Some of the best moments that someone in love has isn't the physical orgasm, release of sex. It's feeling trust and it's feeling close to that person. And so the physical part is part of that, but it's what happens before and what happens after and how we feel generally with each other. That marital bliss that we all want is kind of generally our way of living together. And intimacy, including the physical part, but also the other parts, is the way to connect.
Yeah.
And what an awesome thing. And that really can be heaven on earth, even when you're going through hard things with your children, or, you lose your job, or, tragic world events, like all of these things. And when we get scared, who do we turn to? That's a good question too. When I get scared, I just want you to hold me and tell me everything's going to be okay.
That's right.
Right? And if I don't feel that, if I don't have that desire for you to hold me and tell me everything's going to be okay, then we're not connected. And when I'm in that place, I'm happy. Even when I'm scared.
Right.
It's awesome. And that also is very symbolic of our relationship with God, our relationship with spirituality, right? Our faith and our hope in what we have, our gratitude for the things that are good, even when things are bad. And that helps us focus and helps us stay positive, even when we're being very realistic about, the sky falling all around us. We can still have a lot of hope and a lot of joy, even in that chaos, when we have a connection, especially with a spouse.
Yeah. It reminds me of a quote I saw a long time ago, and I think we probably talked about this before on a different episode, where I saw a husband and wife. They were obviously not getting along. They're back to back, and there's actually a wall in between them, and they're angry. They're upset. And the quote was, the husband thinking, I'm not okay. The wife thinking, I'm not okay. And then at the bottom it says, and that's okay. Right? It's okay when things are not going well, and we have to give ourselves some of that space and time to say, you know what? It's okay that things are not smooth right now. We're going to work through that. Let's give it some time to breathe. Give it a few days. We don't have to solve right this second. It's amazing. When we're watching the show Yellowstone, there's a character there, Beth Dutton, and she could do this with amazing effect. And this is not easy for people to do. And I loved this part of Beth. I was like, yes, Beth, teach us how to do this. Because she would get so mad at her boyfriend, Rip. Like, she would just fly off the handle, full rage. And she would be like, I hate what you just said, but I love you, and I'll see you later at 6. Right? And I was like, that is so hard for us to do. But what if we could do that? What if we can say, I don't like this thing, and it's okay that I don't like it. I don't have to change you. I don't have to force you. Reinforce that I love you. We're going to get through it. I'll see you later at 6. I just thought that was so awesome. And I think about that a lot.
And when you say that to me, I know I'm in trouble, but at least I'm not thinking that you're going to be gone when I get home.
Right. It's awesome. But it's like, we don't know to think about it that way. Yeah. We don't know to handle it that way. And so that's the point of this podcast is to say, hey, there's other ways to approach these things that will really help improve the relationship. Now, another example of blame would be in our minds when we have these if-then statements, right? Like, well, if you just would have helped the kids with homework, I would be in the mood, right? We always have these conditions in our mind, but those are actually blaming sentences. We're saying like, me being in the mood for intimacy is totally dependent on what you do. And that is not a good place to be, because if you don't do all the things on our mental checklist, on our manual for you, our instruction manual, then that means we're never in the mood.
Well, it also means that I start looking at you as a prostitute.
Yes.
Right? Where I'm doing certain things for you whether it's doing a chore or paying you money, like what's the difference?
Right.
When it's about that, that's not a way to connect.
Right. And I think this is such an interesting place because I love that you brought that up, that you can think that way from the husband's point of view, because for sure women do think about things in this way too.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to sex. They're like, I am just the prostitute. I'm just the legal vagina for my husband, right? They also view things in terms that way. And that's a very blaming way to view things when we only think about things in linear and only like an exchange process.
That's not a long-term connecting, healthy way to live.
No.
That might be fun for a time or two to pretend if you're into role playing or something.
Right.
But that is not healthy. And it's not healthy for you. And it's not healthy for me either.
No.
Because then I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to do the dishes and then I'm going to get some.
Right.
That doesn't help at all either.
It doesn't. And spouses can read hidden agendas a mile away. And so if let's say the wife is like in this, well, if you would only do this type of, mode and thinking, she's approaching her husband with a hidden agenda to try to manipulate him into doing the dishes. Like, you're going to feel that.
Yeah.
And then if you're trying to do something to get me in the mood, I'm going to feel that. And those are not the tactics that create more intimacy.
Yeah, and I would recommend anybody listening to this to get on our website, andersoncoaching.com. We're releasing a mini course actually tomorrow called Restoring Intimacy. And we talk about this. We talk about communicating on a scale. We talk about the intimacy trek, the realities of owning these things individually so that we can become closer. And it's less than an hour. It's actually a really good mini course. And it's really an intro video to the deeper intimacy course that's going to be released in about a week.
Yeah.
But I really encourage you to look at that, because this is for people who've been married 60 years or 2 years. It doesn't matter.
Right.
These are real things, and this kind of work and these skills will help you to find ways to connect in ways that you've never thought of before.
Right. And that's key. That is really, really key. Okay. Number 4, this is the last one. What is keeping you from improving intimacy yourself? And again, this really is an important question, because when my clients come to me, they really are coming from an attitude of like, hey, my husband is the one that's always interested in sex, so why should I do any of the work to make this better? What that does is, when we think that way, we put ourselves in a victim mode. We become the victim of someone who we may view as superior. And so our husband's sex drive is the determining force, and we have no say in it, right? That's how they view things.
Yeah, and that's why give him that power when it's your power all along to enjoy intimacy.
That's right. And so a lot of times they will ask this question, like, why should I do anything? He's the one that cares about sex. Why should I do anything? And so when we feel victimized and feel like the victim, and that we don't have the say or the authority or the power, we do nothing.
Yeah.
And when we do nothing, it was like what you're talking about with the project. We feel worse. So while we may be viewing sex in a limited way of only in terms of our husband wanting it, what we've done is limit how we view it and say, well, because I don't want it as much as him, I should do nothing.
So when you do that, aren't you just hurting yourself?
Yes. The person who's thinking that, which is usually the wife, she's the one that continues to be miserable.
She's probably thinking, well, I'm holding back sex to punish him for being a bad boy.
Yes.
But that isn't helpful. And if he's going to be punished, let him punish himself.
Right.
right? Don't punish yourself to punish him.
And again, it's also a very limited way to view intimacy. When a client asks me that question, why should I do anything to improve it? Why should I put in any work? It's because you're only looking at sex as beneficial to the man, to your husband. You are totally disconnecting how it's actually going to benefit you, and not just the sex part, but everything that comes with intimacy. If you're saying none of that matters to you, what you're saying is that you're created with this certain part, the sexual side of yourself. You are choosing to avoid it, ignore it, and neglect it, and hope that it has no negative impact. This is just not true.
Yeah, and the other parts of intimacy that you're missing out on, to be close to somebody and to have trust and to feel that longing to be with them, those are such beautiful feelings that we as humans have the ability to enjoy. And if you're just saying, forget it, I don't want any of it, you're missing out on such an important part of happiness.
Yeah. And so when we do kind of just push that part to the side and say, I don't want to work on this, I don't want to put any effort into this. Again, it's not just saying have more sex. That's not what we're saying. But when we neglect that and avoid it, it does have a ripple out effect into the other aspects of our lives, even if we're not aware of it. It does have a negative effect. So to wrap things up, I want to summarize these 4 points. And these are the solutions that we are looking for to help improve intimacy, even if we don't necessarily feel like we want to. Okay, discover 3 things that get you in the mood that are not related to your spouse. Number 2 was define your relationship with intimacy from what you want it to become. Number 3, delete blame from your life.
But I like blaming so much.
Oh, but this is such an awesome one. Please listen to this one.
It's like crack cocaine. It feels really, really good for a short amount of time.
And then it ruins you.
And it never feels as good ever again.
I challenge everyone listening to this to delete blame from your life. It will force you to think in your higher brain. And number 4, discover other aspects of intimacy that interest you, not just the physical part, not just the sexual part. And do that by deciding one thing. It's like you're talking about with the project. Just pick one part of intimacy that you want to learn more about. And it doesn't even have to be the sexual side. Talk about the emotional intimacy. Discover more about that. Inform yourself. Educate yourself.
Take your Restoring Intimacy course.
Yes.
That's really good.
That will be awesome. Okay, that's the episode for today. We thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and make sure you do share this with people. We are trying to help improve marriages and improve people's lives.
Congratulations on your 100th episode.
Yay.
That's great.
Okay, so remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy within yourself first, the more you can restore it with your spouse. Thanks for listening, and we hope you will join us again next week.